Driver, start your engine!
Good evening, race fans. Welcome to the Lucas Radio Network. Welcome to Drafting the Circuits. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour. We'll go over this past weekend in racing and preview the championship week in NASCAR coming up. I've got Luis Torres and Richard Youden hanging out with me. What's up, fellas?
Hey, how's it going?
Not too bad. Luis?
Going good here at Phoenix. Hopefully we'll have a championship weekend to remember.
Absolutely, yeah. So Louise is out there in Phoenix, going to cover the NASCAR Championship weekend live for us. So we're really looking forward to your report back next week. But so we've been off a couple weeks, but we're back, and we missed a few things. We'll try to catch you up on the news that we may have missed the last 2 weeks. But let's get right into this past weekend because elimination round at Martinsville there. And our championship four are not the usual suspects. 2 out of 4 of them, sure, yeah. But the other guys in there. So now Ross Chastain has been all over the news, and I'm sure that if you watch racing at all, you've seen this. He was. It looked like Denny Hamlin was set to be in that championship four with Ross Chastain. A couple of points behind him and 5 positions back. And Chastain just takes it right up to the wall in what can only be described, a lot of people are describing as a move right out of like Mario Kart, and drags his car against the wall, passes 5 cars, sets a cup lap record in the process, and nips Denny Hamlin to take that last championship spot there. So, reactions are mixed with this. It's well within the rules. He's within the track limits. If you exceed track limit at Martinsville, you're in a grandstand. But scraping up against the wall, number one, that's the only move you could pull off on the last lap. And not drive with a wrecked car. But that's a prime example of just going all out, doing what you need to do when time is running out. So, Richard, what was your impression of that? You've watched racing, you've worked in NASCAR for a number of years. You ever seen anything that crazy before?
No.
Yeah.
No, it was. Talk about headlines for the sport. It was spectacular. It grabbed all the headlines. It was a page turner. It certainly got people's attention outside of racing. To watch that. Was it a good thing for the sport? I don't know. Was there any? Okay, was there any skill involved in it? This is what you're looking for. You're looking for the most skillful drivers out there. And the guy just rammed it into the wall and just hung on. And it was inventive, I'll give him that much. But I think it, did leave a little bit of a like, oh, okay. Is this how we do it now? But, on the flip side, if Dale Earnhardt pulled off a move like this in the mid-'80s, it would be the greatest thing ever. So I think you got to give Ross credit. He went for it. He didn't have a choice, and he pulled it off. He didn't wreck anybody else. He didn't turn anybody.
He didn't turn anybody, right? And he pulled. It was probably the most desperate move I've ever seen that actually worked.
Yeah,
a lot of times
it was a 1 in 10. It was a 1 in 10 move, and it came up.
Yeah, and we've seen a couple crazy things like that in racing before. Yeah, you remember Zanardi in the corkscrew nearly, going off the course and passing Brian Hurd in an IndyCar race, or the famous NASCAR's pass in the grass during the All-Star race at one point in time. But yeah, I've not seen somebody scrape the wall like that, 3/4 of the way around the track. And again, Martinsville is probably about the only track you could pull that off.
Yeah.
Due to the number one, the flat nature of the course and the lower speeds. And so it's both brilliant and stupid at the same time.
Yeah.
But it worked. So
yeah.
and lost
the only the only comment I would have on it from a negative standpoint is, there is, could when you deliberately wreck your car, which is basically what Ross was doing, can you guarantee that you're not gonna, by doing what he did, cause injury to another driver, or cause injury to what happens if his car had like ridden up that wall and mounted into the catch fencing and debris had gone through into the crowds? He's creating a very very difficult sort of scenario, I think, in a lot of people's minds there as to what the risk versus reward, and not just to him but to his competitors and to the spectators, would be, I think, the comment that I've seen coming out of it from a negative standpoint. From a racing standpoint, I don't think it's an issue with it, but from a safety standpoint and putting other people at risk and putting fans at risk, is that an appropriate course of action? That's where I'd question it.
I would say no, but I mean the other thing is when he's just flat out gunning out, going full speed on that wall. Had one of the other drivers been a little higher up the line there, he could have plowed into the back of somebody. The speeds aren't crazy high in Martinsville, but they're moving fast enough to hurt somebody. And we've got we've got enough guys on the sideline in NASCAR this year already. So it's. But the sad thing about it all is, lost in the shuffle, Louise, is the fact that Christopher Bell won his way into the next round 2 rounds in a row. Now, when we were talking about the Charlotte Roval, Louise, you were telling me that you kind of, with a race like that and a strategy like that, you kind of like Bell for the championship. And after Martinsville, I kind of like Bell for the championship as well. I mean, the guy's, been around the appropriate amount of years. He's done well in the lower series. He's done well in Cup. And this is, not once, but twice where he's done exactly what he needed to do without doing any crazy Ross Chastain stuff, winning races right when he needed to win them to advance to the next round. Now he finds himself in the championship 4 for the first time. So, Louise, let's talk about Christopher Bell a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors into Christopher Bell making it to the championship 4. It's kind of how I saw it's like the same mindset I had for William Byers, last year, where nobody really saw him being the favorite or a contender, and then he made it a couple rounds in. Christopher Bell has able to do something similar this year, but capitalize it by winning races when it matters most. For Bell, he had to earn that thing because he was battling Chase Briscoe through pit strategy and all that to get that win. There was a hard-fought battle between him, and you also had like Brad Keselowski and Denny Hamlin trying to stop them from winning. And then at the end, Bell just had the stronger car and brought Joe Gibbs Racing his 200th win, and it's looking to be almost a cultivation of for TRD's talent, because let's remember Christopher Bell has been a mainstay for that development program for years. When they lost Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell kind of became the heir apparent, and should he win that championship, which I do like his odds, that will be a huge deal for Toyota, because it kind of shows, hey, look, a loyal talent was able to get it done, and it looks good on Toyota, because we've talked about in the past how Toyota had these talents and they sort of have blundered it to let those guys go, like a Kyle Larson for the biggest notable example of it. So it's going to be quite fun because Bell has grown to be a much better driver. And I arguably say he's one of the more improved drivers. He's had a strong year. Yeah, when he won at Loudon, it honestly surprised me. It's like that came from out of nowhere. But over time, it seems like Bell has been fairly consistent and quiet. In essence, kind of like how Martin Truex Jr. a year ago, where, yeah, on paper, he may be viewed as an underdog or a long shot. But I'd imagine they'll probably say similar to what Trick said. They don't view themselves as a dark horse. They view themselves as probably red hot at being a champion by Sunday if they time it right, if they get it right.
Yeah. And again, Christopher Bell's with the Gibbs organization that has championships in the past, and they're very, very well run, very professional organization, and I feel like Bell's got as good a chance as any of the other three guys. And speaking of which, so we've already talked about Ross Chastain getting a spot, and we've talked about Christopher Bell getting a spot. The other two guys are both former champions. We've got Chase Elliott, and then Joey Logano, who was safe going into this round, having won in the previous round. So, you got to like Logano's odds, and you've been talking about Logano all through the chase. And, of course, Elliott has been probably the most consistent driver all year. So this is going to be a pretty good championship four when we look at the contrast between the four gentlemen that we have in there.
For sure. And when you look at it, they all have people view them very differently. You have Joey Logano that is borderline between a tweener. Yeah, he's got his detractors for the longest of time, but especially what happened at Darlington that kind of became the breaking point of Byron's promising year. But he's been good at Phoenix. He's now tied with the most championship four appearances with 5. They're joining guys like Truex and Harvick and Kyle Busch, just to name a few. And then you got Elliott, who obviously won the championship 2 years ago, and he's been pretty sporty at Phoenix. And then Ross, who was the highest out of the 4 drivers, he was the highest finishing guy at Phoenix back early in the year. And then there's Christopher Bell just getting it clicking and have Adam Stevens calling the shots too. Adam Stevens won a championship with Kyle Busch, so this could honestly go either way. And I don't think you could go wrong with any of those 4 drivers as far as who will come out on top.
Yeah, I wonder what the Vegas odds look like. I wonder if they're all pretty tight or if they're calling,
one of Chase's favorite.
Yeah, I just wonder if they're calling one of them a long shot, because I really don't view any of the 4 as an absolute long shot or a dark horse. Because I feel like they're all, pretty well accomplished drivers. Now, Chastain, of course, is crafting out an odd reputation this year as being very aggressive. And certainly this thing at Martinsville solidifies that, because, they earlier in the year they coined the phrase, "Oh, you've been Chastained." But again, and then all of Trackhouse Racing, for them, this is their first year after having taken over the assets of Chip Ganassi Racing, and here they've won a number of races, and they've got a guy in the championship four. So you got to really look at Justin Marks and the great work he's done with that whole program.
For sure.
So if you want to look at the odds quickly, this is from DraftKings odds as of yesterday. Chase is favourite at 200, Christopher Bell 260, Joey 330, and Chastain 330.
I might have to take the bet on Logano.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's going to pay off kind of nicely.
I'm not in Washington, so fair game.
Yeah.
Fair game against Washington. You can't do nothing there in terms of bet if any of that's wager stuff.
All right, so let's talk about who we like for the championship. Okay, I'm gonna go with Bell. I honestly, I just feel like this, it's almost like a Hollywood script, and it's meant to be, so it's going to have a happy ending.
I think for me, as far as the championship's concerned, I feel like, I don't know, something tells me as a photographer's dream, I would want Chastain for the visuals. But realistically, I think I'm going to stick to my gut that I've said throughout the playoffs. As you mentioned, Logano. I think just Logano there seems to be clicking at the right time, and be one way to cap off the year by being the first next gen winner in the Clash and capping it off with a win to be the first current gen champion. So Yeah,
I know it's hard to keep up with the next gen, current gen. Yeah, car of
but yeah,
tomorrow, car of yesterday. So
but
anyway,
yeah, I
all
still
right.
like
So
Logano
Logano for
here.
you. All right, and Richard, you like to abstain from picking NASCAR, right?
I think I'd be pretty obvious who I'd be going for.
I know who you're. I know who you're rooting for. Yep, yep, and I honestly hope he does it too. So, that being said, let's talk about the Xfinity race in Martinsville, okay? Because there was as much, if not more, drama coming out of that than there was coming out of the Cup race, and the repercussions of this are still kind of going on. But so you have, Ty Gibbs, who's solidly got him a spot in the championship, and he's got him lined up with a good Cup ride for next year. Takes out his own teammate on the final restart and denies his teammate a shot at that championship four. And goes ahead and wins the race. And then he's unapologetic about it. He compares himself to Jesus in a post-race interview, which I'm like, okay, that's not good any way you slice it. John Lennon tried that in the 60s and they burned his records, so I don't know what this kid is thinking, because you figure as a team player, right? Or even as a manufacturer guy, as a Toyota guy, if he just goes ahead and lets Brandon try to go ahead and win the race without bumping him out of the way, that gets Toyota and their team 2 cars in the championship four instead of 1. So it seemed like a very selfish move on his part. Now, again, I've all this season long, Ty Gibbs has ruffled a number of feathers here and there, but he also has proven that the kid can drive. So, Louise, thoughts?
Oh, where do I begin? Let's just start with this real quick. In essence, Ty Gibbs not only cost Brandon Jones and Toyota having 2 cars in the championship four, and Brandon Jones sweeping Martinsville, because people forget he won the spring, because all people want to talk about that spring race, the fight with Gibbs and Sam Mayer. He low-key inadvertently cost the 18 team that Sammy Smith was driving a shot in the owner's title that still would have been 2 Toyotas for both drivers and owners. So inadvertently he affected both driver and owner's outcomes for Toyota, and that is just not a good look. And I know we've been off, but you just consider what's happened. I know it's Xfinity, but consider what's happened over the past few weeks, like with Kyle Larson and Bubba Wallace, where Bubba just hooked him straight into the wall. That's a safety danger. That's just dangerous. And for Ty Gibbs and Brandon Jones, on the other hand, it's just selfish. They didn't even bother to just nudge him out of the way. Like, people complain about Joey Logano sometimes of being too aggressive, but at the very least, he would nudge him. He won't flat out dump him. Period. That's the physical thing.
Yeah. Well, we go back to and Bubba ended up with a 1 race suspension out of that deal.
Yeah, and justified. I felt like it could have been reprimanded, like what happened with Matt Kenseth, sit him out for the rest of the round. That's what they did, because lost in that shelf, because it had people. Here's the thing: yeah, Bell is in the championship four, but he was in a deep hole due to that wreck with Bubba and Kyle, and that whole fiasco. That put him in the hole for the rest of the round. And if had it not been for that Martinsville win, we would not be talking about Bell going for a championship. And in large part of what happened for Gibbs, I felt like I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. I tried to. He seems like he was getting better, especially when he had his battles with AJ Allmendinger. But then all of a sudden he lost. He threw all of that out the window. He threw it. He blew it. And on top of that, that's not the first callous incident or episode he's had in the past few weeks, because he almost pretty much hooked Ty Dillon into crew members at Texas, and he got reprimanded for it. The fact that he didn't get reprimanded for that ordeal by the organization or Toyota themselves is just appalling, because dude, it's like they're not gonna. It's evident that it's inevitable. Ty Gibbs is going to go up to the next level. Is he ready for the pressure and the intensity? No, he's not.
No, I was thinking the same thing earlier today. I was kind of processing all in the mind. I'm like, and there have been a lot of guys that have been very kind of young and cocky and aggressive in the Cup Series, and some of those guys have been uh, like Keselowski comes to mind, and Kyle Busch comes to mind. Those guys were pretty aggressive and cocky when they were young in the Cup Series, and they ended up being successful. But they also reached a point where they calmed down and started driving smarter. You know, so
Yeah, Ty Gibbs
um,
this could be a potential generational talent, but between, like you mentioned, Keselowski, Kyle Busch, or even Joey Logano, while you have those young, brash, immature, even, let's add Kevin Harvick there too. There's also your Casey Atwoods and Robbie Moroso, where they were heavily touted, and they move up to Cup and they croaked, and then under the pressure with one literally, as the word I mentioned, sometimes when you get up to the Cup level, you got to be mature. You got to have a strong mindset. I feel like Gibbs does not have it, and that's gonna be blown up, and he's gonna be overexposed
oh,
if he hasn't been already in a Cup Series.
he's going to be under a microscope. In the Cup Series, he really is. But right now, he's not making any friends in the paddock. I'm sure people are not lining up to buy his merchandise. So yeah,
Does he have merch?
I don't know if he does or not, but he's really got to work on repairing his image and claiming that he was persecuted in the way Jesus Christ was. It's not the way to do it. That's so
Yeah,
just throwing that back out there again. But yeah, so our final four in Xfinity are Gibbs and who are the other three?
3 JRM cars of Noah Gragson, Josh Berry, and Justin Allgaier. And speaking of Allgaier, there was I thought had it not been for that callous outcome, we would be talking about Justin Allgaier and AJ Allmendinger running very aggressive and pushing it to limit, because we know Allgaier is not the type of guy that will bump people or fight back that way like he did with Allmendinger. And at the end of the day, it was just a racing incident where they battled a little too hard, and the exhaust pipe cut Allmendinger's tire down. And I thought it was going to be like a confrontation. Lo and behold, the confrontations were Jeff Burton, Roger Carruth, and Austin Hill and Maya Snyder, along with Gibbs and Jones. But
Man, Maya Snyder had a little scuffle in the pits. I saw a little video of that. Yeah, so yeah, tension's running high in the Xfinity series.
But at least with Allmendinger and Allgaier, they knew what was going on. They didn't took themselves out. They just rubbed fenders. It's just a little too much that affected Allmendinger from going to the championship 4, which is a shame because he was a top caliber driver. Now, who knows? We'll see how he fares in the Cup Series. But for JRM, that's 3 cars in the championship 4. And we've got 3
Chevys and a Toyota. Well, we could have had 2 Toyotas and 2 Chevys. So good job, good job, Ty Gibbs.
Yeah, and the question is, where will Brandon Jones go? It's like if he's in a position to win, and Ty Gibbs is in the mix, will he help this future team win a championship as a kind of a big send-off message? To like, well, you cost me the championship, so I'm gonna pay it right back by helping my team and parent next year. Jones is going to JRM to replace Noah Gragson in the 9 car. And there's been times where like a driver that's departing that are willing to still help a team that they're in or not, as proven in the Truck Series in 1999 with Joe Rudman, that he was going to not be welcome back to Roush, and he was a man for himself, and inadvertently might have cost Greg Biffle the 99 championship. So anything could happen.
Yeah, anything could happen. Yeah, so you gotta. Brandon Jones is going into this thing with a sour taste in his mouth. But at the same time, I want to say he holds himself together quite well. And I think that he'll do the smart thing and just try to run a clean race. I don't see him going out of the way at all to help Toyota win the thing, or to help Ty Gibbs win the thing. But I also don't see him trying to take Ty Gibbs out to help his future team. So I just think I think he's going to play it smart. I think he's a pretty smart kid.
Yeah, I've known Brandon a number of years now. We've worked together in a number of different organizations, and he's pretty chilled out. And I think, in all fairness to to the people involved in the scenario. There's his numbers marked, in every series, that he takes part in now. If he moves up next year to Cup, which a lot of people are expecting, then I'm sure a couple of the older, wiser drivers will make their opinions known to him, should we say? But it's a shame that it's sort of come to this for Brandon, especially with JJ, because he's a great kid. He's a really, really good guy to work with, and he really deserves that. A really good run. On his day, he can be as fast as anybody out there. Just doesn't have that day often enough, unfortunately. And he's undoubtedly going to be in some fantastic machinery next year. But I think from everything that he's done for Tyler and Tyler have done for him, it would have been a great way to sign off. Obviously, Ty's got a future with Tyler outside of this year, but for Brandon to sign off in this way would have been really good. But I do have one suggestion, one comment that I'd be interested in getting your answer on. And obviously, I think I'm right in saying that AJ Allmendinger won the regular season point standings, and I've always thought this, and I was wondering what your thoughts are. That the guy who wins the regular season gets the automatic pass into the Championship 4. Because I don't think there's enough reward, really. I mean, it pretty much guarantees you like a top 8, but it doesn't guarantee you that Championship 4 spot. And I personally, I think that if you do, win the Championship regular season, then that should, there's a real incentive there. And I think if that guarantees you a spot in the Championship 4, I think that justifies it. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that.
I don't know. Would you be opposed to making a Championship 5? Or unless the regular season guy is one of the 4, you go with the 4. But if it's 4 other guys, you get. I like the idea of awarding a little more to the championship, regular season championship. But again, if we're gonna do what NASCAR set out to do, which is to mirror stick and ball sports, right?
But winning,
like winning.
I was gonna mention that real quick.
Yeah, winning a division is not a guarantee to get to the
Super
Bowl.
You get a bye.
You know what I mean? You get a bye, yeah.
If
you get an incentive.
Yeah, if anything, they should get at least like a guaranteed spot in the next round or two, because I'm thinking about hockey, like the regular season champion is known as the President's Cup winner, and at least they get a bye, but sometimes they'll get clapped out of the round, the first series that they're in. So I can, as far as putting them all the way to the Championship 4, I think I'm not sure how I feel about that, but if they get automatic advancement to the next round or next 2 rounds to at least they're guaranteed into the round of 8, I will not be too opposed with it, because I mean, if they're trying to emulate the stick and ball sports, that'll be the equivalent of a bye for the regular season champion.
Right. But if they end up getting themselves where they eliminated, you know what I mean? So what's the incentive to drive hard through the playoffs if all you got to do is show up in Phoenix and you got a spot?
But where's the reward from winning the regular season?
Oh, that shitty little trophy they give you.
Exactly. So, in theory,
and the 15 playoff points with it.
15 50. Yeah, you do get 15 playoff points.
Yeah, but it's not. You can that can dwindle pretty quickly if you have a couple of bad weeks. But in theory, you win Daytona, you're locked into the top 16. There's no real incentive. You question what would people do in the first 11 races of the playoffs or whatever it is. 9 races of the playoffs. Well, to the flip side, if you win Daytona, what do you do for the next 28 races of the regular season or whatever it is?
Well, just like Austin Cindric, not much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that I genuinely think that if you did that, they would still compete and they would still battle and they would still put themselves up there, and they you want that momentum. You want that team cohesion going forward, and you want your pit crew to be sharp and on the ball and not make mistakes and stuff like that. So, you've got to keep match fit if you like. But it would be, I don't know. I just think that, you need to reward that a little bit more, maybe. And, unlike stick and ball sports where it's 1 against 1, this is 1 against 35 in reality. So, your margin for error, your margin for not winning is far, far greater. You've got a 2% chance, 2 and a bit percent chance of, in theory, with 35 cars in the field. It's not quite that way, but you got a very small, in theory, a small percentage chance of winning each race. So, you're not going to say that your overall champion is definitely your best driver, and I do certainly think it should be rewarded more.
Well, I mean, in years past, we didn't even have a such thing as a regular series champion. That's more of a newer phenomenon. I want to say, was it 2017 we came out with that?
Yep.
Yep. And Martin Truex was the first guy to win it, and even when he won that was like, this is kind of meaningless.
It's nothing, is it? Yeah.
It's nothing.
The paperweight.
Yeah. So
at least they've done away with the idea of giving out trophies for stage wins.
yeah.
Like Ronnie Shoulders, I think Ronnie Shoulders' face is like, it's a one-time thing. Let's not do that, because imagine like Truex that year in 2017 has like hundreds of trophies and like 2/3 of it was just stage wins because of it.
He'd have to put an extension on his house for the shelving. So anyway, but the trucks have a championship as well. So Louise, who are our last 4 guys in truck?
We have Zane Smith, Chandler Smith, not related, by the way, Ty Majeski, and defending champion Ben Rhodes. So you got 2 Thor Sport trucks. You have front row. Yeah, I almost want to say first row because we're talking about Truex, and then KBM. And this is, of course, Chandler Smith's last race with KBM because he'll be going to Colleague Racing full time in 2023 to be replacing AJ Allmendinger in that ride. So it's gonna be a bittersweet ordeal for him. For Ty Majeski, he's been on a roll. He's won 2 out of the last 3 races, which so happens to be his first 2 wins. And I feel like in a piece that will be coming up in the coming days, my main focus on Majeski is how the journey he's had in his racing career, because he's obviously a touted short track racer, but his NASCAR career, when you look at it, it's taken him a long time compared to Austin Cindric and Chase Briscoe. As we all recall, those 3 drove the 60 car in Xfinity. That was a complete disaster. With 4 years ago, a lot has happened since. And for Zane Smith, it's just if Zane Smith were to win the championship, whereas Xfinity, Ty Gibbs or Noah Gragson win it, we could finally see for the first time the 3 national touring champions for the previous year competing in the Daytona 500, because it's been established that Zane will compete in the 500 in February. So it'd be curious to see how that goes, because the big story, the big controversy of the Truck Series Championship for is Torres kind of like not giving it 100% effort to assure Rhodes to make it to the championship for, which frustrated Stuart Friesen, because he made it clear, it's like, that's what happens sometimes where Friesen a single truck team full time, whereas Swordsport have 4 to 5. So of course there's going to be a lot of politicking played around and the controversy that surrounds it, but it stands. NASCAR seems to see anything wrong with it, so it stands with those championship 4 guys.
All right, so that's everything will be decided next weekend in Phoenix, or this coming weekend in Phoenix, rather. And Louise, you'll be there to catch all the drama or the boredom, depending on how it all shakes out. So I'm sure there's some guys hoping for just a nice, quiet race where they just lead the whole thing and walk away with the championship. So
it's gonna be complicated, especially Cup, because the owner's title is also on the line, where the 5 team of Kyle Larson is trying to go back-to-back owners championships, whereas Chase Elliott, if he wins the drivers championship, because they're not in the owners championship they'll be 5th in the final standings, I believe. I had to double check the points of the owners standings, but there's so much on the line The only thing that is guaranteed, that's already pretty much decided, is the ARCA West title, which is Jake Drew. But other than that, a lot is at stake. A lot of end of an eras and a lot of streaks also on the line. When you look at drivers who haven't won, Martin Truex Jr., he's had 7. He's won for the last 7 straight years. Brad Keselowski, 11 straight years. Ryan Blaney, yeah, he won the All-Star race, but he has 5 straight years. But the last time we saw a non-championship Ford driver win was the last year before the championship Ford was implemented. That was 2013.
And Lewis Hamilton. Oh, sorry, wrong.
No, speaking of Lewis Hamilton,
yeah. So that's a good transition. Now let's talk about Formula One. So, before we start, getting into the talk about the Mexican Grand Prix. So the FIA have announced what their sanctions are going to be for Red Bull, and it's going to cost them $7 million and testing days.
Wind tunnel days, 10% reduction in, 7% reduction in wind tunnel time, I think.
Yeah, and there's a lot of folks that feel this is a mere slap on the wrist. But of course, Red Bull says it's a draconian penalty. So,
of course they would.
Of course they would. Yeah. So, but what are your thoughts, Richard? Do you think the FIA has done enough or not enough, or do you feel that that's just about right?
It's a little bit lenient, I think. I don't know how much more they could have gone, especially with stuff like wind tunnel time. Because they've already allocated a lot of their wind tunnel time for next year, and it's probably already been used. There'll be full scale models of their 2023 car in the wind tunnel already. So that's or half scale. Sorry, if you run full scale, that cuts down on your testing time, doesn't it? So it's all a little, the fine, they'll find that money from somewhere. That's not too much of a problem. I'd like to have seen the fine come out of their budget for 2023. But again, a lot of that's probably, already been allocated. And when you actually look at the accounting side of it, it boils down to they actually had a filing error. So this original $1.5 million overspend actually turned out to be about a $400,000 overspend because their accounting screwed it up. So number one thing on Christian Horner's list to do is find another set of accountants who can actually do the maths correctly.
And the other thing I hear, he needs to find a less expensive caterer.
Yes,
because he blamed a lot of it on catering costs. Okay, well, just get the guys some burgers.
Yeah, exactly. It goes back to the old Elton John thing, doesn't it? Why do you spend $20,000 a week on flowers?
Because I
like flowers. Yeah, it's like, okay. But there were some other things in there. There's some redundancy packages because obviously now again, I think some of these things could be Red Bull. Like trying to play the world's smallest violin. We had to lay people off because of these budget caps, and we had to pay the redundancy of that cost and all this sort of stuff. Obviously, we don't know the ins and outs of the exact accounting side of things. Where all the money flows, and each team will, obviously, they'll have a basic concept of X number of percentages of funds is based on engine, another X percentage is chassis, another X is salary, another X is whatever. So each team's going to be roughly around the same proportion of spending. So it'll be interesting. Obviously, they turned around and said, "Oh, well, our catering cost $100,000 more than we expected." Well, okay, but that $100,000 went into another engineer to do sim work or suspension geometry design or whatever it may be. So it all comes out the same pot at the end of the day. So I don't buy that as an excuse from that side of things. So I do think they've got to be careful on this one.
They just need to really be careful what they do in the future, so this doesn't become an issue for them again. Because again, it's their championship from last year is already tainted a little bit by the officiating the final race. Now this taints it even more. Although, this year, Verstappen's been pretty damn bulletproof. And again, taking another win here in Mexico. I mean, since we've been together last, since he wrapped up the championship in Japan, he's picked up 2 more wins.
Yep. Yeah. Oh no, for sure. And it does leave a little bit of a bitter taste in the mouth on their championship performance. But there's lots of historical trends of that as well. You look at some of the Ferrari victories in 2019 before the FIA clamped down on their engine, whatever it was. We still don't know. Does that create a doubt in people's minds over some of the legitimacy of some of those wins? I think it has to. The whole Spygate in the early 2000s. Does that leave a little bit of a bit of taste in the mouth there? The Crashgate with Nelson Piquet Jr. crashing in Singapore, which ultimately cost Felipe Massa the World Championship. There's lots of these little scenarios throughout history which, there's a what if caveat to them. So, it certainly does make you sit up and ask questions. But I think in the grand scheme of things, there won't be an issue there. You also have to ask the question of Mercedes here and Toto Wolff. The whole they haven't come out of this whole thing in the last year or so, I guess, going back to Abu Dhabi last year, smelling of roses. The revelation that Toto was having dinner with Michael Massey 3 days before the final race of the season. Again, that's like Bill Belichick having dinner with a Super Bowl referee 3 days before the Super Bowl. You should be never allowed to happen. And how did Toto Wolff know about all these overspends before anybody else? How did he know that Red Bull and Aston Martin had exceeded the budget caps before anybody else seemed to come out? How did Mercedes know that they were allowed to put 2 reinforcement stays on the flooring for the Canadian Grand Prix before they actually turned up to Canada with these 2 stays when nobody else knew about it? There's some questions that need to be asked about Mercedes' behaviour in all of this for sure. I don't think they're completely innocent in this. And the FIA are in a very difficult position. They've really got to tighten ship right now and then take control of this and make sure this doesn't happen again.
Absolutely. Yep. So, yeah, I mean, Formula One's always been a little bit cloak and dagger and cutthroat. So, there's always a lot going on behind the scenes that I think we'll only ever know the half of. So, but let's talk about Logan Sargent real quick. Logan Sargent announced as the Williams driver for next year.
Potentially.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I'm going. Right, but he'll be the first American in F1 since Rossi. But he doesn't quite have enough super license points, and he's been trying to gain additional points through free practice 1, but he came up short at Mexico, where there were just too many red flags in the session. He wasn't able to get the required number of kilometers under his belt, so he didn't pick up any points there. But he needs to maintain that 5th place in the Formula 2 championship when they get to Abu Dhabi to do that. So potentially, if he and the 2 guys behind him are only behind him by a little bit, but I think if he doesn't have an incident, I think he actually get 2 super license points for a clean season, which is an odd little rule in there. But yeah, if he drops to like 7th in the championship, he's gonna come up. He's gonna come up short. So do they start somebody else and put him in every free practice 1 they can until he's got the points?
Josh Caputo has turned around and said that they do not have a backup plan. So they're obviously confident. Now I'm sure they do have a backup plan. So they are obviously confident that he does get the points. But we talked about this in the past. In mid-season around Silverstone and some of those races, Austria and Paul Ricard, he was a championship contender. But then since his name started to become heavily linked with being more than just a Williams developer driver, an actual Williams seat contender, his performances certainly have dropped off. Has a hand on heart, has he done enough to justify a drive in Formula One? as near and dear to my heart as the Williams team is, and as not wanting to throw shade on them, I think this is a political move rather than a sporting move. I don't see what he will bring to the team. I don't think he's any better than Latifi, to be brutally honest with you. I would far rather have seen them pursue Danny Ricciardo at some length, or Nico Hulkenberg at length, or even a Mick Schumacher potentially, as his future is in doubt at Haas. So there's a lot going on there in the background, but I really do think that this is a political move, and no matter what Caputo or anybody else from the Williams team says, this is purely we've got 3 US Grand Prix next year. We want to get a US driver in there, and let's just, join the dots on this one.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah, when the whole Colton Herta thing fell through, where it became evident the FIA was not going to grant him any kind of exception on a super license to, move into Formula One, suddenly Sargent's name is linked as getting the Williams seat for next year. So, yeah, it's not a secret that, Liberty, being an American-based company, would like an American driver, especially with 3 Grand Prix in the United States next year. So, but we'll just have to see what happens in Abu Dhabi. I mean, Logan Sargent cannot afford to make any mistakes. He's got to bring that thing home in one piece, and he's got to get a good finish.
Yeah, he'll have to, because when you look at the track, when you look at it, it'll be neat to see the first America on F1 grid since Alexander Ross is the first full-time since Scott Speed, but I totally get where Richard's coming from for sure, because there's so many other guys out there. I know Ricardo has said that he's not interested of going anything less than what he's capable of, and I think he's kind of accepted the fate that he's just going to have to take the year off and see where his mindset is.
I think he'll be a Mercedes reserve driver, because Stoffel Van Dorn has now been confirmed as the Aston Martin reserve driver. So I think Danny Rick will end up at Mercedes as their reserve driver, sim driver, or whatever it may be.
Which would not be a bad fit. It's just a matter of how well he does in it, and see where, if anything opens up, that could be in the caliber of him. But I feel like the prime may have slipped by, but we'll see, because let's not forget Mika Hakkinen took a few years to get to hone his craft. You never know.
Well, he made his debut in what?
91, I think.
Yeah,
then he was reserve driver for McLaren when they didn't let Michael Andretti finish the season. They put him in for the last couple of races of the season there. And then he really came on, and then he won his back-to-back championships. And
it's just took him a
98, 99. Yeah.
Yeah, it took him a while because of injuries, and just let's not forget the first year of Mercedes was a disaster. Poggio was a fail. So it took him a while. He was a late bloomer, and then when he hit his peak, he decided to leave in his prime, just when he not that long after. But we'll see how Ricardo. If he goes,
I think there was some mental scars there that probably cost him that concept of being in the prime. I think those 2 championships took a huge. He's a very emotional guy, and I think those 2 championships certainly took it out of him. But yes.
Oh yeah, if you've been a 99 where it looked like it was slipping away from him, when it looked like Heinz-Harald Frentzen and Jordan. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember him crying in the trees at Monza. Pretty.
Yeah, it won't be the only driver that was in tears in that 99 season. Luca Badour.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So while we continue our history lesson, so let's.
I'll mention something
so
about.
We've got. Let's real quick. We've got about 10 minutes left. Okay. Obviously we already mentioned Max Verstappen won in Mexico. There wasn't a lot to report from the race, but there have been some interesting IndyCar movement with sponsors and drivers, and this would be NTT Data leaving Chip Ganassi Racing and aligning themselves with McLaren, or Arrow McLaren SP, which I believe was NTT's plan. They were going to come over to McLaren with Palou. The whole Palou thing fell through. where he's going to stay at Ganassi. But there's no contract in place for NTT to stay there, so they're over there. They're going to put their name on Felix Rosenqvist's car. They're additionally going to put their name on Tony Kanaan's car in their additional entry for the Indy 500. So they've got a pretty strong Indy 500 lineup. When you consider the guys they have there, Rossi's a 500 winner, Tony's a 500 winner. Pato did great at Indy last year. He just only came up a little short, and then of course the other guy being Felix. So I think see, a lot of folks are kind of feeling like Zach Brown and McLaren are poaching everybody's drivers and sponsors and whatnot, but I feel like these guys are moving in the right direction, and folks just want to align themselves with McLaren.
Yeah, they have a massive conglomerate. Let's the Formula One, Formula E coming up. So I'd imagine, but it also does help that NTT there is going to a team where they have drivers that they've sponsored before. Let's not forget Kanaan and Rossi, of course, had NTT data in their times with Ganassi. So it's very interesting when they made the move, but in essence, it makes sense. And also, like I mentioned, they sponsored those two drivers before. And I feel like Errol McLaren are no question going to be tough to beat in this coming 500. But the question is, how will Ganassi respond, defend their title, and see. The quite big mystery is Palou now in terms of sponsorship, because let's not forget.
Ganassi has made a statement, or the team rather has made a statement that the 10 car is in no danger of not being funded.
That's good.
They said they fully intend to run the 10 car for Palou. If you recall, they had other sponsors on the car, including like American Legion and Clover and those sort of things. So I'm sure they'll scrounge up enough money to keep him on the track. But certainly the NTT money walking away it doesn't help.
No, it does. And no, it doesn't for Palou, because let's not forget at the beginning when he started Ganassi in 2021, he had Segway as also a sponsorship. I don't think we see Segway since then. So I'm curious to see what kind of liveries. I feel like Palou is going to have like a ton of them this coming year. I would not be awfully surprised with that.
Yeah,
and a lot of business to business sponsorships too.
Probably going to rival Graham Rahal for the most liveries in a season. Yeah. So
speaking of Rahal, fourth entry for the 500.
Rahal has guaranteed a fourth entry for the 500. They've not announced a driver or a sponsor, but they said they are definitely running 4 cars for Indy. So we're actually going to we've got enough cars out there now. We're going to have actual bumps at the 500.
Sure.
Coming up this year for sure. And then even if you talk about, even if you count up to, I think we're up to 35, and that's not even counting some of the other, like could the Enersons be able to put a program together? They're sitting on a couple of cars there, right?
Yeah.
You could, and of course, you've got the perennial Will Mariotti doing his crowdfunding again, but I read that.
Busch's status too.
Kyle Busch is said he'd be happy to drive for a Chevrolet team. But the whole Will Mariotti thing. I mean, this guy tries every year. The closest he came was he brought an additional sponsor, a minor sponsor to was it Elysian driving for Schmidt Peterson at the time. So they
Mikhail
so they threw his name on it, said Schmidt Peterson with Mariotti Racing. But what Mariotti Racing lacks, other than money, is they lack a race shop, a race team, a chassis, an engine lease, an agreement with Firestone. So it's a hard sell. And he's out here trying to do the crowdfunding. Said, for $10,000, you can own 1% of this team. I'm like, okay, number one, who's got an extra 10 grand sitting around? Fan wise,
Frank, we know you.
Fan wise, right? So I mean, like literally, like my IndyCar group, we sent $3,000 to Top Gun Racing last year, just to be a minor sponsor on their Indy 500 car, and they didn't make the Indy 500. They didn't enter a car. So that's when you had the whole argument between them and the Enersons about who owns those chassis, but those chassis both belong to the Enersons now. And, the fact they have a couple chassis put them farther along than a guy like a Will Mariotti, right? But you still got like Beth Peretta racing, who's possibly could get something going for the 500, although it's likely they're going to try to do what they did this past year and just run a couple road course races later in the season. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But we'll definitely have a pretty good full field at Indy with some guys that are going to get bumped and sent home.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting 500 for sure. And if I had the choice to be there for qualifying or the All-Star race in Norfolk, I'm still going to have to go with a bumping in the 500 because it's just there's drama in it, and especially if and when Kyle Busch and do get a ride, one can hope, there's going to be buzz around it.
Well, there'll be a lot of buzz. I remember when Kurt Busch was there, there was a lot of buzz. I spent a little time I was hanging out with Kurt Busch and Juan Montoya out of all the people that you could hang out with, and had a nice time with those guys, on one of the days leading up to the 500, sitting up there in the media center. And I found Kurt to be really humble and trying to absorb all he can. And it showed in his race result. He didn't embarrass himself at all. I want to say he finished sixth or seventh, something like that. And but yeah, it brought a lot of eyes to the sport, a lot of cameras to his pit. So and you see the same thing if you get a Kyle Busch in there.
Yeah, totally. And when we brought up Ray Hall briefly, my curious question is just kind of like very, very far as priorities concerned. What are going to do with the car number? Because they go every 15. The 60 and maybe the 75 are occupied. So I'm curious what they're going to do with it. That's just a little banter I had. It's like, what number are going to be the fourth entry? They can't go 60 because that's Meyer Shank's number. But question, Frank, now I think of it. Is there a rule for any driver allowed to use the number 0? Or that's not allowed for IndyCar?
It's been used before.
Not in recent memory, though, right?
As recently as like 2011 or 12, somebody ran the 0 at the 500. I remember I was asked this question not that long ago, and there is somebody, I can't remember who it was. I remember the car was green, So, but you can run the 0. Years ago, it was illegal to run the 13. Then they dropped that rule, but nobody's ever really done well with the 13. When you look at the guys that have, I mean, the first guy to run the 13 was, I think, Billy Murphy, and he did kind of miserable with it. Greg Ray tried the 13. EJ Vizo ran the 13, and then
Danica ran it one time.
Danica ran it into the wall on her final 500. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I was just curious because I was thinking that fourth entry is like, well, I wonder what number is going to be that fourth Ray Hall entry, unless it's going to be any collaborative.
They could just pick any number out of the hat. You know what I mean?
That is true, but it's like
anything that's not in use. So, but yeah, I do understand what you're saying. 15, 30, 45.
Yeah.
So the next one will be 60, which is taken.
And 75 it boils down to Enerson, I guess.
Well, I think 75 is Top Gun, but I mean, they ain't gonna be around. I'll guarantee you that.
Yeah, so that's probably their next viable option. But we'll see. That's many months from now. It's just kind of like little fun speculation in this IndyCar off season, which has had its twists and turns already. And that's saying that is an understatement because who knows what will happen next.
Yep. So, well, I'll tell you what will happen next is that we're out of time. So we've got Phoenix coming up this weekend. We have a week off before Abu Dhabi, right, Richard?
Yes, and then Abu Dhabi.
Brazil,
Interlagos, Abu Dhabi, back to back with a week until those. Yes.
Oh, I don't know why I forgot about. I just feel like the season should be over because it's November. But
there's concerns about Interlagos' fate as far as the scheduling for this year, but that's a whole different topic for another time.
I think we're close enough to the race that this one will take place. But but going forward, I don't know if you're going to see Interlagos on there. Well, no, they just announced the schedule for next year, didn't they?
Yeah.
Interlagos is on there at least.
Yeah, there's 2 editions next year of Vegas and Qatar.
All right. So anyway, Richard, Louise, I want to thank you guys. I want to thank you folks who listen to us. I want to thank Hoobazoo Radio Network, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. But until next week, good night.
Hoobazoo.com